question: is the future sustainable without a collaborative supply chain? My name is James Pope. I'm one of the managing directors here at Beaumont Bailey, and I'll be chairing our discussion for today. For those that don't know us, a short introduction. We're a specialist search firm operating across the global industrial sector, and we support organizations identify and attract world-class leaders. And we operate across a range of industrial subverticals, including manufacturing, chemicals, automation, electrification, distribution, and technology. This webinar is a much requested continuation of our extremely popular Sustainability Champions series, which each of our panelists contributed to. And in that series, we interviewed leaders from across the global industrial sector to help better understand some of the key challenges they were facing. One theme became very clear very quickly, and that is that no business is an island, and answering the key sustainability challenges requires organizations, government bodies, and other parties to work together. And we're going to be exploring that theme in a bit more detail today with experts from a range of different industries and from a range of different points in the supply chain to better understand their perspective. We're going to start by exploring a few key themes that came out in our discussion, and then we're going to be going into a Q&A, questions posed by the audience. But through the course of the discussion, please feel free to put some questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen if there's anything that comes up through the conversation, and we'll endeavor to get round to you at the end of the conversation. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our panelists to each introduce themselves in turn. And Elena, perhaps I could start with you.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you, James, for inviting me to be part of this panel. I'm really delighted to be with this team here today. So, as you mentioned, my name is Elena Guede. I'm a doctor, a PhD in chemical engineering and MBA. And since September 2021, I am the SVP Sustainability Strategy as part of the group sustainability in CRH. So I started working in the construction sector 29 years ago, developing different roles like quality, environment, sustainability, also innovation, before being appointed as plant manager, as main plant manager. At that time, I was the first lady being plant manager in my company and in Spain, which is quite a challenge. And I developed that role for 6 years. And after this period, I moved to another corporate role before being appointed as SVP Sustainability Strategy, as I mentioned before. So let me just introduce for a minute CRH. CRH is the leading provider of building materials and solutions that operates in 29 countries, mainly in Europe and North America. And we employed around 76,000 employees, and our revenue is around $36 billion. So we are just more than a cement and concrete producer. I would like to say that we are really able to provide a wide range of integrated building and construction solutions. Thank you again.
Elena, thank you very much. But now, Ad, I'd like to hand over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. And thank you for the invitation. I'm really delighted to be there. It's really great to have those discussions. So for my part, I'm not an engineer. I have an MBA and a master in sustainability, but I have 27 years in the cement industry, out of it 14 years with Holcim. Then I resigned to create my own consultancy company specialized in cement. Most recently, I was involved in the COP28 presidency team to represent the cement sector. I'm also still in the Cement Breakthrough Initiative, co-hosted by Canada and the UAE. I'm also coordinating for the GCCA, the Global Cement and Concrete Association roadmaps worldwide. And since February, I'm part-time as executive director in a new center created by the PFL University in Lausanne, Switzerland, which is the Center for Worldwide Sustainable Construction. It's brand new. So this is it for me.
Yeah. And now, John, I'll hand over to you for an introduction.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Tros. I have a PhD in procurement and supply chain. Actually, the interesting part is I used to be a partner at KPMG, and when I worked at KPMG, I developed the sustainable CO2 calculator for the building industry used in the Netherlands to determine which product to use, or how a supplier could really provide the right products and even get a better price if we really had a CO2 better performance than other companies. Now I'm responsible for operations of BME Group. BME Group is, in addition, also the executive, which is responsible for the E in the ESG across the group. BME Group is a Blackstone-owned portfolio company, used to be part of CRH until 2019. And we operate in 8 countries across Europe, and we distribute building materials across the whole of Europe, from a bathroom till roof tiles, or from concrete till wooden beams, which are used in the construction of a building, a highway, or etc., etc. So we are sitting in between a lot of the construction companies and the production companies, actually.
John, thank you so much for that introduction. Well, I'd like to just see if I can invite our last panelist, and if you just bear with me one moment, I'll just try and let Suruch in.
All right.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, and Suruch, pleasure to have you with us. We've just done our introductions, and we just finished with John, and so now it's your turn, straight into an intro to everybody in the webinar here.
Well, sorry for the cold sweat and all the technical issues. I managed to get my own cold sweat. So nice to meet you all. Delighted to be here. My name is Suruch. I'm the global head of sustainability for Schneider. Actually, what it means is that I'm looking for everything that is not, let's say, Schneider as itself, but rather its business ecosystem. So from our suppliers, but also our business ecosystem. And what we're trying to do, at least, and that's part of my vocation, is how we do sustainability at scale, and we show that sustainability has business value. So I'm coming from a background which is very much, let's say, sales, strategy, and so on. And I fell into the sustainability soup, if I may say, when that small thing called COVID-19 happened, and the topic was starting really to raise in terms of awareness. And my point was really to look at it and say, hey, how can we actually try to get more engagement willingly from the industry into that, and hence looking at the way, let's say, business owners and leaders also look into this issue to kind of speak their language and embark more and more businesses there. And very nice to be here.
Well, thank you to each of our panelists. And for the first part of our discussion, I would like to get each of our panelists' perspectives on what the industry is doing well in trying to achieve its sustainability targets, but also what it's not doing so well and where the opportunities are to improve. Elena, I'd like to go to you first.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you, James. So first of all, I would like to comment a little bit about concrete and the use of concrete in the wall. And we have to consider that concrete after water is the most widely used material in the world, and it is about 30 billion tons per year, which is a lot, okay? And the reason why concrete is used so extensively is because it's a durable, flexible, versatile, 100% recyclable material that absorbs CO2 also and have a very high thermal efficiency. So all of this makes us thinking that concrete is going to be used and continue to be using from now to the coming century, for sure, right? So thinking about that, I will say that the cement and construction industry was committed to reach the net zero target by 2050, okay? And for that, in 2018, and mentioned before, the Global Cement and Concrete Association was created in 2018 just with the purpose of helping CRAs and all the other leaders in the industry to decarbonize the business. So through this association, we created and agreed a global decarbonization roadmap where 40 of the world's leader producers of cement and concrete are included, representing around 80% of the global production, without including China at the time. And we are committed really to deliver and put in the market net zero concrete by 2050, and also play a positive role in the sustainable development especially focus on the built environment. And I would like to say that one thing that we also do good is informing and giving information to our stakeholders about where we are and how we are moving and improving our sustainability performance. Okay, and I like to give you some figures maybe that can give an idea of where we are. So thinking about decarbonization and circular economy, for instance, I like to say that we were able to reduce around 23% of our net CO2 emissions per ton of cementitious, considering a 1990 baseline. At the same time, we were able to reduce by 80% the fossil fuel consumption, which is also a great achievement. And at the same time, and thinking about the same baseline, 1990, we were able to improve our energy efficiency by 90%. All of them are really great achievements, okay? And apart from that, we are really trying to give information to our stakeholders and along the value chains on what our impacts are based on a tool that we created in GCCA on the environmental product declarations to be able to calculate the impact of every product that can help the supply chains to create life cycle assessment that can help to decide what is the best material for each building project. We continue working on improving our operational levers. I like to say reducing the use of fossil fuels, increasing the use of alternative materials and being more circular, reducing limestone use, and also thinking about electrifying our fleets. But I like to say that, for instance, we are piloting new technologies, next generation technologies, but we appreciate some roadblocks that are slowing down our evolution to be able to get our targets. And maybe someone can continue with that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lena. Anna, I'll pass over to you to get your perspectives on that and also your views on some of the things that Lena shared.
Okay. The positive point, if I take the cement industry, I think they really took the decarbonization ambition, target, vision very seriously. It's true, because when I compare with other industry, they are really, really ahead. So this is a really good point. They are doing their homework, which means that, like Elena said, they are doing some roadmaps. And they are really working on it, how to decarbonize. They really look at, okay, what do I have to do by when, and what are my levers where I have to act, which is good. It is really great. They are investing currently even in low carbon cement. They also invest in this new technology of carbon capture, which is really something unknown, a new technology. So they are taking risk and they are there. So I think that's really positive. If you tell me what are the negative points, I would say, since it's a heavy industry, moving the industry is quite slow. I mean by that is when you have a huge capital expenditure for a new project, you need feasibility studies, which can somehow takes time, and especially in heavy industry, which means heavy capex when you consider those industry. So they can sometimes move slowly for people from the external, especially when you have this timeline of 2050 or 2030 in front of you. But this is what I would say, it takes time because it's a heavy industry, and sometimes it doesn't reflect the reality. And another thing is that the cement industry never used marketing. They do not market themselves. The good thing, I consider not enough. So they should somehow maybe, yes, explain why they are slow, but it's coming. And at the time when they are entering this process of capital expenditure and investing, then it's a domino effect. So those are the plus and minus I would consider.
John, I'd be interested in your perspectives here, in your position in the supply chain, being at the cross section between, I suppose, manufacturer and consumer. Give us your sense on some of these topics.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the perspective from a production company. I bring it from a different kind of angle, because yesterday I was sitting with one of the biggest construction companies in Europe, and I had a discussion with their executive management team on the topic of ESG. And first, look, the positive points is that the whole industry is looking at scope 1 and scope 2. So how to decarbonize their own process and how to decarbonize their way of working, using e-trucks, using less transport, using renewable energy, etc., etc. And those are positive points, but the real change, and for instance, I had a meeting with them because we advised them how to win a project based on the footprint of certain products that could be used during a building of a product. Because in the end, the scope 3 of a building is actually the products which are go in. But the energy we use as a distributor or the energy we use for transport is nil with the energy used for producing the materials which goes into a building or a highway or say what. And then you come in a kind of interesting discussion where you hit several topics, and maybe I can explain or allude on some of these challenges. One is sustainability doesn't have the same weight across Europe. Certain countries have other perspectives than other countries. If you look to the Scandinavians, the Netherlands or Belgium, you see a high focus on it. But when you look to other countries, it's got a lesser focus or a lesser focus in the challenges. So that's one. Secondly, and what it means is that some countries are still focused on the lowest price product, and sustainability is not a topic which plays in their selection process. Great criteria. I think a second discussion which comes into play there is the complexity of the construction methodology. Let's give an example, because I think it's good. You can if you build a wall of a building, you can use very large bricks. But in the Netherlands they use wood with on the outside small bricks. The one methodology, the large bricks, uses a lot of energy in the production, while the wood and the small bricks use less energy. But the wood and the small bricks use more energy in summer for cooling and more energy in winter for heating. So from a production point of view, it looks more sustainable, but from a usage point of view, it might be totally different. And that can also be done. A wall can be constructed out of multiple solutions: concrete with bricks, concrete with plates, concrete with inner wall bricks, outer wall bricks. So what solution is the best solution to build from an inner perspective and an outer perspective is a discussion which is untransparent at this moment. Then if you look to product transparency, there are suppliers which don't, and there are large suppliers and suppliers which are really producing a lot. They don't even have product passports. They don't have LCAs, NEN 15804s, which clearly states what the environmental footprint of a product is. And then we talk about suppliers which are making EBDAs of 33%, which are market dominant, and they say to you as customer, yeah, I don't have that. And then if you then go and next step is the professional in our supply base. We have here around the table a lot of CRH, a big company, but a lot of companies are pop-and-mom stores. So small pop-and-mom stores which produce certain products, or they have a concrete mill as a family, or they have and they are totally not aware of what they need to do, how to make things happen. And that creates complexity in the industry. And then finally, I think what for me is, and I got multiple things, but it's really the unclarity in the legislation. If you look how the EU has set up this legislation, the NEN 15804, which has to be applied to industry, they have put something on paper, but they haven't totally thought of how should the data then be made available to the market? How should this data be made clear towards companies? How do we ensure that if CRH produces something and Holcim produces something, that they are comparable 100%, and that a customer can then see that CRH is better or Holcim is better from a CO2 point of view or from a renewable product point of view, etc., etc. And if you look from that perspective, the EU has thought of a legislation, but didn't thought about how to implement, how to make sure data transparency is there, and how to drive that across the industry. Because if you have that, the industry will change automatically. And that's the challenge we are in as an industry, that we have intransparency in the industry across the whole product portfolio, which product is most sustainable and which solution is most sustainable to build, and from which point of view do you look at the solution, and in which safety, because also you have to take safety into account, all these things. But that's the challenge which you have at this moment.
Wonderful. I think that's a transparency topic is particularly interesting, John. Suj, let's get your perspective on this, and perhaps if you have a view on that transparency element as well as your initial remarks, we'd be very interested in hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, I love all the items that were brought by my colleagues. I think they're spot on. What I think is going well in the industry is many things are changing, to be fair, and I think the pace of change is accelerating. Even from Asia, where I am, you see it's starting to move, regulations are coming, money is starting to be invested, investors are looking for, let's say, companies that are working on projects or that are themselves sustainable. And that's really a good thing, right? All right. I was just saying that basically the good side of things is that regulations are accelerating. Finance is also being more and more invested on ESG or ESG-friendly topics. And we have that, let's say, trend that is coming globally. So it's already quite present in Europe, but it's also happening in Asia, where I'm currently seated. And it will take maybe a few more years, but it is there. So you have that space today for companies to move there, which is actually quite friendly. And I would say, when you look at what companies could, what the industry could do better, I would look at two things. Of course, there is everything that John said, and I fully agree with those. The AEC industry is quite complex. You have a big variety of stakeholders, and if you don't all speak the same language and look at the same, let's say, referentials, you cannot compare apples to apples, right? And this is where you kind of lose, let's say, the relevance of or the consistency of what you're doing across the life cycle of the building, whether it's on the embodied carbon piece, meaning what you actually use to build the building, or the operational carbon piece, which is how will your building behave and how it will come through. And that's definitely an issue that we wanna solve. And I think, regulation is one thing to look forward, but also, as John said, I also agree that companies that will move forward and show the way, we actually manage to showcase an example and drive some if I may say, benefits from it business-wise. But one thing that I really think is maybe starting but not being completely generalized yet is today, many companies are still looking at sustainability as something complicated, as something a bit overwhelming. You have risks of greenwashing, you have risks of backlash if you don't do it properly. And actually, I think that there is definitely some simple recipes that we can use and where we can really demystify sustainability, or rather carbon here to be more precise, and just give those recipes so that we go at scale. And I think this, by what I call productizing or demystifying sustainability, making it a bit more, let's say, plug and play. So you don't need to be an expert to actually, decide some best practices, like, having some building management in the case of what we do, or just going for some, simple systems like, reducing water consumption and so on. Those actually are simple recipes that are proven and that we don't necessarily need to have, let's say, super precise data on every project to kind of scale them and move further the pace of the change that the industry needs. The second piece that I would point out, and I'm saying it here because it wasn't mentioned by my colleagues already, is there is also a sort of carbon tunnel. There is a lot of focus on carbon. And the reality is that today carbon is, let's say, the biggest topic and the, let's say, the star of society when you talk about it today. But companies should not neglect what's going to come after. And namely, you're going to have also resources, water usage, biodiversity. Those are trends that are also going to start to hit, just like carbon hit last year or a couple of years ago and started really gaining in importance. And I believe it's something collectively we should look at and prepare ourselves for, so that we're not caught, let's say, by to be compliant late, but we prepare ourselves as businesses to kind of make the most of that change and drive the pace forward. Hope I made sense.
Wonderful. No, absolutely, Suze. That's very interesting. Thank you.
And
John,
can I add something to that?
Please, yes, please.
Because if you look to the NEN 15804 set by the European government, the topics just mentioned by my colleagues are all in. So about water usage, environmental impact, all these things are actually into that standard. And it's interesting to see, if you look, for instance, to the Netherlands, if you can do an MKE, which is really a measurement of the environmental impact, and it's then translated into euro from a CO2 carbon point of view, of recyclability of the product, how much it thinks. And it's really interesting that the standard is there. There is a standard in the industry which you actually can copy across the industry, which covers 90% of the products from a strategic point of view. The question is, can we apply that standard harmonized across the industry? Can we make it available in a standard data format? And if we have that, it would make life much easier, because for me, the discussion is, I think we should not compete on having transparency on data. We should compete on who has got the best sustainable product and how can we create, and how can I create the best sustainable product or the best sustainable business solution. And that's where partners in supply chain should compete, not on making transparency, because if we don't make it transparent, we will not go to the end goal of getting a better sustainable building and a better sustainable world in the end.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, and I think the application of that standard and that common language of transparency is fascinating. And perhaps I could get your perspective on applying a standard of transparency across the supply chain. What are your thoughts on how that can be improved? To John's point on applying the standards that exist already in a way that's even-handed across the supply chain.
Standards, because we are here talking about global north standards. I have to come back a bit, a helicopter view, knowing that 80% of the future construction, which is housing and infrastructure, will not happen in the global north, but it will happen in the global south, which is Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, where they have sometimes standards, cement standards. They copy the ASTM, the American standards, or the European standards, like that. They have sometimes building codes, sometimes not. They have sometimes concrete codes, sometimes not. They're having governments that don't understand the concrete codes and the building codes and just want security and more security. What I would say by that is that in some countries, you can't even come with a low carbon building material, a new one, because the government doesn't trust it. Because the prescribers that are hired by the government to build anything, a hospital, schools, social housing, says, oh, if this building collapses, I will go to jail. So you are coming with a new carbon cement, but I'm afraid I don't know this cement, and if it collapses, I don't want to put my name on it. So no. So we have roadblocks on every stage. Even if we have the perfect low carbon cement in place, ready to go on the market, you have in front of you a lot of roadblocks, and those are standards for sure. We need to review them. Should we go to performance standards? That's another discussion also. Why should we copy the American standards and the European standards? Maybe we go on performance-based standards. And then also with the CO2, or we can also come, the UNIDO is coming with a new green public procurement and also a definition of what is low carbon cement or concrete, because everybody says low carbon, near zero carbon concrete. But what is it? What does it mean? How much is it? Do we have a comparison? Can we come with a concrete like we have our fridge? A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Yes, why not? But all those standards and codes, yes, but we need to be careful where, and if they exist, we need to change them. And changing existing standards in countries sometimes is so difficult because you need to convince everybody. And sometimes you have very old school prescriber and structural engineers there that say just no.
Wonderful, thank you, thank you, Elena. I'd be interested in your perspective on the roadblocks that you see from your vantage point in CRH in the adoption and drive of sustainability through the supply chain.
Yes, sure, I can progress on that. Anne mentioned some of them that are really super important, especially what he said about product formulation, which is once you have a new product, a lower clinker concrete, for instance, it needs to be accepted by the traditional and conservative industry, and this takes time. And this is one of the roadblocks that Anne mentioned. I want to mention also one that is connected with the transparency. If we move more through a modular construction and thinking about integrated solutions, not just delivering materials, but just integrated solutions and services, this can help also to create connectivity between various parts of the supply chains, and including more connection of delivering transfer data and transfer information that can help to what John mentioned, right? Just to be able to create something like the view of the building, not the view of the materials individually, right? Then another roadblock that we have is connected to one of our operational levers. I mentioned one of the operational levers is the use of low carbon fuels. And when we think about that, we really need to move from traditional fossil fuels to new fuels. And for that, we need producers to move in this direction, to generate low biofuels, to generate more biomass based fuels. And for that, apart from the suppliers, we need to be sure that the agencies allows us to use these materials in our cement business, in our concrete business, in our transportation machines, okay? And for that, we need to move ahead on the regulations and on the environmental permits. Another one that I see is connected with the material efficiency. I mentioned before that we are really keen to use a lot of alternative raw materials to replace limestone or to replace clinker, to produce cement with lower clinker and lower CO2. And to get that, we need the support of regulators, legislators, and technical standards that allows us to increase the level of recycled material that we can use in our own product, okay? Because, for instance, CRH is a net waste consumer. We are able to receive more material and consume more material than the waste that we regenerate, which is great, right? And it's a common way in most of the cement companies, but we can do more on that. And finally, I will say the final roadblock that I want to mention is connected with innovation and the new technologies, because we are talking about electrification of the kilns, we are talking about carbon capture, and mention the difficulties to move in this direction in a short period of time, and hydrogen production, because all of these are new technologies that we need to develop in a short period of time. And for that, these technologies are not yet evaluated from the cost perspective today, because they are just pilots in most cases. So we cannot just go and accept and go ahead and spend really a big amount of money in investments that we don't know what is the final cost, or we don't know what is the efficiency of this technology, or we don't know what is the cost of exploitation of this technology. And this is something that is still pending, because we need also a lot of support from the governments to create something like infrastructures to be able to transport and to store, for instance, CO2 if we move ahead on the carbon capture. So the first installation is going to be available around end of 2025, but there is a lot of uncertainties about the technology and other things that are being explored for the moment. And this is, I will say, the main roadblocks that we see for the moment right now. And I want to comment one more thing, if I can, James, is connected to the scope that you mentioned that is very interesting. I would like to say that in CRAs, we have a very, very ambitious target of decarbonizing our business by 2050, and very ambitious target to reduce 30% of our CO2 emissions worldwide in absolute numbers by 2030. And we include in this absolute reduction also scope 3. So our commitment is to reduce scope 1, 2, and 3 at the same time. And for this, collaboration across the value chain is super critical, as you can imagine, James.
No, that's fascinating. Thank you, Lena. That's really interesting. And I'd like to move our conversation onto the kind of last kind of key theme, as I'm conscious of our time. And this really is focusing on the solutions that we feel are out there in order to advance the decarbonisation and sustainability efforts that we're making across the supply chain. And in particular, what are the key things we feel that the industry can do better in order to advance and accelerate the direction that we're moving in. Suruj, I'm going to come to you first to get your perspective on what a key solution may be.
Sure, and with pleasure. So my view is that the industry, if you look, of course, the large companies have, resources and plans to have, let's say, a sustainability agenda, even embed it into their business models when they're quite advanced. But I think if you look at the industry overall, it's also an industry that is having more than 95% of companies which are small and medium-sized companies. And if you want to basically bring, let's say, that change at scale, there is a component which is education in a sense, but education talking also to business owners and helping them understand how they can tackle it for their own companies, for their own projects, in a way that is profitable for them and their customers, and how they can also basically make their business future ready, so that when regulations are going to be more stringent, where they're going to be requested to have, let's say, more reporting and so on, they can be ready ahead of the curve, right? I believe really when I say education, it's really how you embed it within your business models, right? And I think the key to that is really helping them first understand what we mean when we talk about sustainability and what are the easy to reproduce solutions that exist. Link it to their business models and their business value. So here, actually, Elena also mentioned it. It's a question of, what are the simple things you can do? How can you train on that? What is the value you can take of it, right? For your business, or how you can say it to your customers, what's the ROI? And helping them do so in a way that is, I always use those 3 words: tangible, measurable, reproducible. They won't learn, they won't be sustainability or carbon experts. So the idea is, how do you help them have just enough knowledge, and how do you bring them the tools so that you can massify that effect, and basically through them, in a sense, also prescribe the market and prepare the market to accelerate that change that is needed. Now, on the way to succeed, I think it's that piece of education is an illustration of collaboration. Basically, we need to acknowledge that no one alone has a solution, and embedding ESG as part of just any strategy or portfolio management is key. Whether you look at it internally, whether you look at it in the way you embed it in your products and your business models, collaboration and managing ESG just as part of your portfolio is the key to make your business and the business of your customer, helping them get there. Let's say sustainable ready, understanding how they can basically make it a competitive advantage for them. And I believe there is an avenue in the next few years, probably a few more years in Asia or in other parts of the world and in Europe, to basically lead those businesses and help them make it even a competitive advantage. This is what I call sublimating sustainability, trying to move it from, let's say, being, and this is sometimes the way it's perceived still today, meaning something a bit complex, something that is thinking your P&L and being a cost center to actually something you embed into your portfolio strategically, looking at it really with prioritization, and basically something that can help you stand out and be future ready in your market.
John, I was coming to you there and asking you your perspective on the key solutions available to us to advance where we are.
So when I started an assignment for the ministry responsible for road building in the Netherlands, the only way the market was able to change, and you have about 5 big construction companies in the Netherlands, is because when they started to define what is sustainability, what do we mean by sustainability in buildings, and how do we score that in the process? And what you tend to see is when customers start to ask, the industry starts to change. And at this moment, what you notice is that banks start to have financing discussion. The CSRD guidelines are coming in, but the CSRD guidelines is a reporting on carbon, actually, nothing more, nothing less. And some companies are just taking it as a kind of a reporting position. But the thing is, and that's where I convey with with the previous colleague who's speaking here, I think the question is, we need to educate, or we need to start harmonizing what do we mean by ESG, environmental friendly building, sustainable supply chains, sustainable parties. That's the first step, I think. The second step, the industry needs to come together and needs to adapt a standard. If we don't accept a standard on which we're going to report, there will not be a standard, and the EU will not provide it, or a governmental body will not provide it, or it will be different per country, which will make it very complex to manage in-country, cross-country. So I think we need to get together in transparency on data and transparency on topics. And that's where I think the industry has got a challenge, because customers, construction companies, distributors, the higher you go in the value chain, the less EBITDA you see coming into that chain. So the most EBITDA is in the producers. And so there has to become some funding in the industry to start making transparency and then bring it to the education level, which I agree. And if we're able to do that, and we are investing heavily in it, let's be clear, but if we are able to do that jointly with some partners across the chain, and some partners take the front lead on that, and we're doing that, but if we're doing that with some partners in that area, I think CRH can meet its target, because in the end, CRH, to get Scope 3 development, is dependent on its customers. And so the customers need to get into that role. So I think cross industry, some corporations need to come together where they're going to steer on that topic. And if they do that with 2 leading distributors, or 1 leading distributors, and 2 construction companies, and two big suppliers in the chain, then you can drive change. You need to get a cross industry cooperation between some big players which drive the change in the chain. That's what I believe really needs to happen.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. And I'm going to come to you next. And on top of the solution that you're thinking of, I'd be interested in your perspective on one of the questions we've had through the Q&A, which is, what role do you think that regulation should play in particular stimulating demand at a customer level for sustainable products? And I'd be interested in your thoughts on what role that should have in stimulating demand.
Very easy. Knowing that the government often is somehow the first customer of building, housing, infrastructure, they only have to put elements in their procurement asking for green product. They can come with a certain percentage, saying if they come with a procurement for a hospital, they can say X% of the material should be low carbon construction materials that reach so much kilo per square meter. For example, France did that. The RE 2020 has some limitation on CO2 per square meter. Why not? But then when they do so, they may not say that they would then take the lowest cost. They should then apply also saying, okay, we will not take the lowest cost all over the offers we receive, but the lowest, the more sustainable material should be somehow the target and not the lowest cost. And this is this green procurement pledge that UNIDO is trying to bring across all the countries worldwide, is really to bring somehow a sense of responsibility from the government side as one of the largest construction materials customer. And to come back on the supply chain, I totally agree with my colleagues. We need to bring everybody together, which means that we need to break the silos between architects, structural engineers, construction companies, ready-mix producers, cement producers. And that's somehow what the center at EPFL would like to do, is bringing all those people together and work together in terms of research, in terms of education. I think young architects may not go out of school before knowing what are the building materials, what are the CO2 within each building materials, what is the scalability of building materials, how do I calculate the CO2 of my beautiful building that I just created on a paper. Or structural engineers, I want them to know how to calculate and how to optimize their building. So coming back with more sustainability courses, stupid CO2 accounting for architects, for structural engineers, future, before leaving university, they need to have this, absolutely. And that's what we try to really bring that together and creating those courses in order that all the stakeholders have a view of what the others do.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Anne. Elena, can I invite you in to comment on this as well?
Sure, I think that Anne touched a lot of points, especially connected with the green procurement, where I think is super important. And France is a great opportunity, and we are learning a lot from the French regulation to extend it to other European countries. I will say that also there is a role that the government can play on the legislation or regulation, and it's connected to the potential transportation and use and store of CO2. Okay, because today there is a bit of lack of knowledge and lack of regulation on the transportation characteristics, on the CO2 quality, on how to account if you use CO2 from other industries. So there is quite a lot of topics open today, especially in Europe, where we need to in a way address and move ahead if we really want to progress with some of the potential technologies that we can use in future. This is something that will take some time. I want to say that the CCUS technology is not fully developed today on the industrial scale because it's not tested, but it will take a long time to be developed. And any project that you want to implement will take years. But we really need to assure that the government, in a way, support the business and the companies and the industry to move ahead on that with the proper regulation that can help to have quite a lot of security on what you are investing on that. Okay, and this is an important area that needs some regulations, I think.
Wonderful.
And also
Wonderful.
on that, I can say also if you get better regulation on what it means about the lower carbon fuels, for instance, to decarbonize transportation quicker, to decarbonize fuels that we use in the kilns quicker. All of this will help and will motivate the industry to move quickly and accelerate our progress.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question before we finish, and perhaps John, I'll come to you for this one as you're in that interesting interface between producer and customer. But what else, other than regulation, can the industry do to stimulate demand at a consumer level for sustainable products? Is their sustainability credentials alone enough to make customers buy the slightly more expensive sustainable products, or do we need other benefits, features, advantages of these products as well?
No, I think that it's not always more expensive, to be transparent first. Yeah, let's be clear. It's not always more transparent. Sometimes it's smart. Let me give an example. We're supporting a project in an area where they use a lot of hennep. And there is a production company which makes plates out of hennep, building material plates out of hennep. So you don't need plasterboard, you need hennep plates. So then it's then most effective. I think there are a few things here. I think one is financing is going to play a big role. You see banks at this moment starting to use lower interest rates for companies which have sustainable products. And I think one of the big drivers is going to be the financing structure. That companies will get a better financing structure if they have a more sustainable point of view. Secondly, I think the cost of energy, short-term cost of energy will be a driver for getting more sustainable solutions in place. So there are external drivers there. And then there's the inherent feeling of people really wanting to build more sustainable in a certain case, and that's what does it then cost extra at a certain moment? That's a challenge. Does it really cost extra? Because I run tenders from a ministry of highways, and did it really cost extra? Maybe 1 or 2%, but in the end, the total CO2 impact, but also the usage was much better. So we always look at costs, but sometimes these costs are not different. It's more the transparency which makes it clear, and the alternatives which make it clear.
Yeah, very interesting point on which to wrap up our discussion for today. We've just run out of time, and apologies we didn't get to all of the questions. I see quite a few more flooding in here on the back end of the webinar. But what I'd like to do is thank all of our panelists on behalf of the team here at Beaumont Bailey for their time and their insight, and we very much appreciate the information and the insight you've shared with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James, and the team there.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.